Hello, BookTube, and this is my first installment for Dectember. It's an event happening all September. Myself and Mark at Book Time with Elvis sort of devised this, and our co-hosts are Steve Donahue and Michael K. Vaughan, and possibly a few others. um, but yeah, it's a celebration of the detective in all his or her guises, and to celebrate the detective genre, our subgenre of crime fiction. Now, I have decided to read sort of pre 1939 or 39 and before material. And as my sort of ongoing look at, I've been recently, well, occasionally, I should say, looking at the American dime novels, I decided to go with Nick Carter, who originally appeared in basically dime. He's a dime novel detective that started in. I got dates here. First appeared in Story Paper New York Weekly on September 18th, 1886. It was a 13-week serial, and it was called The Old Detective Pupil, or The Mysterious Crime of Madison Square. Now, the character of Nick Carter was devised by Osmond G. Smith, and one of the founders of Street and Smith magazine, or publishers that started at that time and continued on, and they published like Astounding as well, and other science fiction, and other many pulp magazines. But also it was in sort of in combination with John R. Coryell, who was a dime novel author at the time. This might have been his second attempt, but he didn't. He wrote a few, but he sort of retired, I think, from writing because he didn't like the idea of being known as a dime novel novelist. Yeah, this appeared in 1886, so this actually predates Sherlock Holmes. But it's an American sort of detective, and he set in New York, and it became very popular, and it was taken over by Frederick Van Rensselaer Day. And apparently he wrote like over 1,000 novels and committed suicide in 1922. And as I say, it was very popular. Nick Carter got his own magazine, the Nick Carter uh, uh, Nick Carter Weekly, I think it was. Yeah, Nick Carter Weekly, and they started reprinting as well. What they called the New Magnet Library reprint. So that went into the teens, but it ended around 1915 and was replaced by Detective Story magazine that had more than just Nick Carter in. So Nick Carter sort of ended around 1915 in its first sort of iteration. Or I guess you could say it's almost his second iteration at that point. But then they tried to revive it in the sort of mid to late 20s, which failed. And then Street and Smith continued and started new popular magazines, Doc Savage and The Shadow. And according to what I read here, it says that Doc Savage was given the background of Nick Carter. Now, I've read the first novel here. Well, it's 13 parts, but it actually turned out to be a novel by Coryell, The Old Detective's Pupil, or The Mystery of Madison Square. Now, and then it was, but they did bring him back in the 30s, and he became popular with films, and then in the 40s and into 50s slightly with radio programs. And then it sort of lay dormant again, from what I understand, for a while until about 1964. They revived Nick Carter in I think there was like close to 200 or more, possibly, novels, short novels. But it was more on the lines of James Bond. and that lasted from 1964 to 2000. I don't think there's anything else happening at the moment. But the first book I read it on. I had to read it on as an ebook. And Nick Carter is young. It's sort of he is sort of an untried detective. His father is Sim. Well, his name is Sim Carter, and his father is renowned as being a detective, a private investigator, and he has sent a client from his friend, the police chief, uh, a rich man, Mr. Livingston. Comes to the police and says, my daughter has disappeared, and a $100,000 bill. Yes, there were a few of those around occasionally. So the police sends him to Sim Carter, and because Sim Carter has never failed at solving a case, but he explains the reason why he does that is he only takes cases that he knows he can solve. He doesn't really want to take the case, but Nick says, well, let me do this. And Nick, after his father's already spoken to Mr. Livingston for a bit, Nick disguises himself as his father and apparently is perfect. He can do the voice. And yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. So he engages, or while Mr. Livingston engages Nick, thinking it's Sim Carter, to investigate. So Nick is, as his father, is investigating. But then he finds that it's a little more deeper than just his daughter sort of running away from home in a sense. She is an adult, but it's a little more than that. There's other things afoot, if I can use that. And he finds out that there's a bunch of these bad guys, and they're following him around. Sorry, I'm opening back up my tablet here, which is so they follow him, but then he gets his father to sort of distract him because they think he's him, right? So, but his father gets killed, and this is I'll read a little bit occasionally from this so you can get the tone of the style of writing. And he says, for a moment, the young detective stood as if frozen. Then, with an uncertain hand, he lighted another match and held it to the gas. The next instant, he was kneeling on the floor, moaning, Father, Father! The old man lay dead upon the floor. For 10 minutes, it might be, Nick bent over the body, incoherently coaxing his father to speak to him just once. Dead, dead, he cried. At last, as if the truth was forced upon him. Dead, dead, he whispered. A sudden light, fierce and vengeful, gleamed in his eyes. Dead, yes, but those who did it live, and live for me. He took the cold hand in his. Waking or sleeping, night or day, I will not rest until the brain that planned it and the hand that did it perish. And he said no more, but kissing the icy lips, rose to his feet, a hard, implacable man. So yeah, it's very OTT. But sort of typical of sort of pulp type material. And going back to his disguises, Nick Carter seems to be able to disguise himself as anyone, and nobody knows, and he gets the voice immediately, man or woman. Now, it's a bit hard to believe because, either they don't talk about this, so everybody is the same height as him and the same build as him, or is he able to interchange, height, size, and everything? But he can imitate anybody's voice. He can actually make somebody else look like somebody, imitate somebody else as well, or at least the appearance. So it's a little over the top, but he does have the abilities in many ways that Sherlock Holmes turns out to have. Because with his father's death, he looks around, he goes to the police chief and asks him, here, this is the situation, but let me solve it. And this is what he gleaned from it. So he has the deductive abilities, massive deductive abilities like Sherlock Holmes would have. They don't go into the detail about that, but he's able to figure out all this stuff from the murder scene. And he's also super strong. He's extremely strong and agile. He's very swift of mind, and he can hide. He gets into everywhere and listens to conversations in houses. He gets into scrapes all the time, and he's always coming out on top. And then he sort of, he falls in love with one. Like, he thinks, first of all, that she's a baddie, but turns out she's not so much. And he's tied up in a room with the gas on, so he's about to die. And but he like they chloroformed him, but he held his breath so he wouldn't pass out. So but then he hears sudden door knob going and stuff like that, and it says, then too he might have heard an anguish cry of locked. Oh, what shall I do? His heart might have sunk at the next moment to hear the footsteps retreat along the hall and down the stairs. In another minute, however, hope would have revived, for the step was returning. A moment's pause at the door, and then thud, thud, thud. A heavy object was being pounded against the door. Alas, the hand that wielded it was too timid, too feeble. But quick, harder. The brave man in there is dying. Do you hear? Again, now, again. Good, blow. Once more like that. No, the door was not yet yielded. Have courage. Do not despair, noble girl. He is dying, that brave man. Well struck. Again, now, again. Never mind who hears. He is a human life, and it gives. So again, it's like the narrator is prompting the girl on to break the door down. It's kind of fun, but it's typical of the time. And then there's another scene. He goes, to Nick, honor was dearer than life. So he's very honorable, truthful, and all that. And then he sort of plighting his troth to Ethel, and he goes, "It is true, my poor old father. You saw what they did to me. Why should you doubt what I say? And what is 1 or 2 lives to those men? And you, oh Ethel, Waldron, beautiful as you are, good and pure as you look, kind as I know you can be, how can you enter into a plot which has already ruined a happy home, cost 1 life, and may cost more? On your soul will lie the guilt of all murders. And for what? Money?" And but he, it is what it is. It's pulp fiction, but in the dime novel form. So he finds out, like, it's a very sort of convoluted story. He finds that there's more to it than just, as I say, the daughter running away for whatever reason. There's past history of her mother and the bad one, but they don't sort of say, like, why all of a sudden this sort of happened, unless I missed that. And it is like it was written over 13 weeks, so it has the issues, I think, of something that the writer never really plotted out. He was just flying by the seat of his pants, writing as it goes along, and then tying everything together. But it does come together pretty good. It just sort of says, well, like, it's been 18 or 20 years. Why all of a sudden is this happening? And it's that kind of thing that usually, but you suspend belief to go along with the story. But as I say, there's convoluted thing. You think it's going one way, and you think it's this way, and then and then he finds out something else. But he like, first of all, believes what one person says, and then somebody else tells him, "Oh no, that's the truth." But there's no. Well, there is evidence he finds, but he believes that before he gets the evidence. And then it sort of, it ends. The Coryell did 3 stories. I've got the second one, but apparently he marries his love in the film Ethel, and then in the story. I enjoyed it. It's like it's typical. Like, the one thing I found when I was reading the Iron Man of the Plains ones, it's like there's hardly any longer paragraphs. Like, there's 1 sentence paragraphs that just bang, 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 and then occasionally they've got a little more, an actual paragraph. But it's enjoyable. I like I say, I've never read any of the new ones, but I think they're more on the line of James Bond type, getting girls and the girl at the end and saving the world probably. But these are more. I think they're more modest, and I think that changed probably in the 30s to make well, he's basically made him more Nick Carter more hard boiled in the 30s. And I'm curious to see what like there's the saying that Doc Savage got his background, but I'm not sure because from what I remember of Doc Savage, he's very different. What creates Doc Savage? But unless they go on and this is just the first story, so there's very little in it. He becomes a detective at the time. They don't say how old he is, but it's pretty clear that he's been sort of an apprentice to his father since he was young. There's no real mention of his mother at this point, so it's him and his father. So he's got to be either in late teens or early 20s, I would think, because if he was in his 30s, he would have been already practicing, you would think. But he sort of thrust into things because of the death of his father, and he wants to continue on as a detective. I'm not sure whether at this point I'll read the second one for this month. If I have time, I will. I was hoping to flip over and read the first Sexton Blake story, and I found one, but I don't think it's the same title as the first Sexton Blake, which is the sort of pulp, I guess the equivalent of that in the English papers, but Sexton Blake was more, I think, a pastiche or rip-off of Sherlock Holmes. Because they couldn't obviously use Sherlock Holmes, but yeah, like I say, when I kind of remember when Sherlock Holmes the first story came out, but this did predate it, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these stories, that have been written over the years, and as I say, there's the radio. And the film, so I'm gonna hopefully listen. I have listened to some of the radio programs, but I'm curious to see what it plays out. And something that would be nice to do would be to, like I say, read the first. Well, apparently the first 3 stories are sort of a trilogy, and I've got the second one. I don't have the third one. I'm still looking for it. It's called $1 Million something, I think. And then read some from, which I do have quite a few, some of the stories from the teens, that iteration. And then even when they tried to bring it back in the 20s, it'd be interesting to read something from the 30s and then into the 40s, and then read a couple sort of the, I think they call it the Killmaster revival in 1964. But I know those books are around. I've seen them. I've never read them, but I've seen them over the years because they've been just close to 200. You can't avoid when you see paperbacks in various places. But yeah, so that's enjoyable. Has anybody read the original Nick Carter or even the later iterations, or even better, if you read all the iterations, and what do you think of the differences with them? I'm curious to know, but I definitely want to read more of the dime novel, Nick Carter, for sure, either now or in the future, because that is sort of my dime novel investigation, I suppose. And I've been reading a little bit about dime novels as well, just as a background, but I don't think I'm going to talk because it doesn't really fit in with too much with the detective or for Dectember so much. But it is sort of an interest of mine, the same as pulp magazines and the Penny Dreadfuls here in the UK that were very popular. Anyway, I will be back next time. I'm not sure exactly with what. Hopefully something again this week, and then I'll be working on The Big Sleep, a nice annotated edition, and I'll talk about that and be doing the book to film for The Big Sleep as well. Thank you, BookTube.